Some AI experts like Anthropic CEO Dario Amodei say that white-collar jobs are on the chopping block.
A bloodbath for white-collar workers because of AI.
Artificial intelligence will lead to a reduction of its corporate workforce eventually over the next few years.
See it replacing a whole lot of white-collar jobs.
Entry-level workers probably are the most affected.
It can do the work already of researchers, of analysts, a whole host of entry-level white-collar jobs.
Half of entry-level white-collar jobs disappearing and 10 to 20% unemployment in the next 1 to 5 years.
The artificial intelligence will allow corporate America to wipe out tens of millions of decent-paying jobs.
Goldman Sachs says somewhere between 6 and 7% of American jobs could disappear. The IMF warns it could hit 30% in the next economic downturn. And the CEO of one of the companies actually building AI systems? He's projecting 50% of entry-level white-collar jobs gone within 5 years. That's not a margin of error. That's the difference between 2 million jobs and 30 million jobs. Which matters, by the way, if you're trying to decide whether to go back to school, switch careers, or just hope this whole thing blows over. Because the experts who are supposed to know can't even agree on the order of magnitude. Here's where it gets truly insane. Daron Acemoglu just won the Nobel Prize in Economics in 2024. His prediction for AI's economic impact over the next decade? GDP increases maybe 1 to 1.5% total. Not annually, total, across 10 years. That translates to roughly 0.05% annual productivity growth, which is basically nothing, statistical noise. Meanwhile, Dario Amodei, CEO of Anthropic, which builds Claude AI, is warning about a white-collar bloodbath with half of entry-level positions eliminated by 2030. Kai-Fu Lee, who ran Google China and now invests in AI, validated that exact timeline. 50% displaced by 2027. So who's right? The Nobel Prize-winning economist who studies labor markets for a living, or the guys building the technology who know what's in the development pipeline? Because that answer determines whether your job is safe or whether you should be panicking right now. Let's walk through what these predictions actually mean. Goldman Sachs economists project 6 to 7% displacement if AI is widely adopted. Their model suggests unemployment would rise about half a percentage point above trend during the transition, typically 2 years based on historical technology shifts. They're basically saying, yeah, it'll be disruptive, but we've seen this movie before. Electricity disrupted jobs. The internet disrupted jobs. AI will disrupt jobs. Some people will struggle during the transition, but the economy adapts and creates new positions. About 60% of current US workers are employed in occupations that didn't exist in 1940. Technology destroys jobs and creates jobs. Circle of life. That's the optimistic case. Manageable disruption. The IMF looked at the same data and basically said, hold my beer. In January 2024, their managing director warned AI will hit labor markets like a tsunami. About 40% of global employment exposed, rising to 60% in advanced economies. But here's where the IMF really darkened their tone. By May 2024, they warned that in the next economic downturn, 30% of jobs in advanced economies could face replacement. Unprecedented job losses and unprecedented numbers of long-term unemployed. 30%. That's roughly 50 million American jobs. The IMF analysis suggests about half of exposed jobs might benefit from AI through productivity enhancement. The other half could see AI execute key tasks, lowering labor demand, wages, and hiring. In extreme cases, jobs disappear entirely, which is quite a different vibe from Goldman's "it'll be fine in 2 years." Then you've got Amodei dropping the most alarming projection in May 2025. Half of all entry-level white-collar jobs eliminated within 5 years. US unemployment potentially spiking to 10 to 20%. That's not some random doomsayer. That's someone who knows what AI systems are being built right now, capabilities that haven't been released, features the public hasn't seen. He specifically said most CEOs are unaware of AI's short-term disruptive power because they focus on current capabilities rather than systems in active development. So, The pessimistic case: half of entry-level white-collar jobs gone by 2030, 20% unemployment, economic catastrophe, and sitting in the middle, actually not even in the middle, way off to the side, is Acemoglu saying everyone's high on hype. His argument? Only about 20% of job tasks are exposed to AI capabilities, and less than a quarter of those exposed tasks can be profitably automated in the next decade given current costs. He warns against AI hype, and notes that evidence from easy-to-learn tasks might not generalize to hard-to-learn tasks with context-dependent factors. He sees no evidence of widespread new task creation happening yet. His forecast is basically marginal impact. Some jobs affected, mostly overblown. The economy will grow about 1% over 10 years from AI. That's it. 4 serious projections. 4 wildly different outcomes. The range spans from barely noticeable to white-collar bloodbath. Here's what makes this actually maddening. These aren't random people speculating. Goldman Sachs employs some of the smartest economists on the planet. The IMF has access to global economic data nobody else sees. Amodei is literally building the systems that might cause the displacement. Acemoglu won the Nobel Prize for studying exactly this kind of labor market transformation, and they can't agree within 28 million jobs. The Tony Blair Institute tried to model different scenarios for the UK to capture this uncertainty. Their tailwind baseline scenario projects about 1.5 million jobs displaced over decades. Peak annual job losses around 100,000 in 2040. Peak unemployment of about 340,000 workers, fully unwound within 5 years as new tasks emerge. That's the gentle version. Slow displacement. New jobs created. Everyone adapts. Their whirlwind disruptive scenario paints a completely different picture. 3 million jobs displaced. Peak annual job losses over 270,000 in the mid-2030-50s. Peak unemployment of 1.5 million around 2040 with a 10-year lag before new tasks absorb displaced workers. Same country, same technology, wildly different outcomes depending on adoption speed and new task creation. Here's something interesting about the current data. The St. Louis Federal Reserve found about a 0.5 correlation between AI exposure and unemployment increases from 2022 through 2025. Computer and mathematical occupations saw the steepest unemployment rises, so AI is definitely causing measurable displacement in specific sectors. That's not disputed. But the Economic Innovation Group found something puzzling. Between 2022 and early 2025, unemployment for the most AI-exposed workers rose about 0.3 percentage points. For the least AI-exposed workers, it rose almost a full percentage point, which suggests AI isn't yet the dominant driver of economy-wide unemployment. Other factors are bigger. So in 2025, we've got evidence that AI is hurting some sectors badly, particularly affecting young workers in tech occupations, but hasn't produced the macro-level unemployment surge that worst-case scenarios predict, which means we're in this bizarre liminal space where the displacement is real but contained, for now. The question is whether this is the calm before the storm, or whether the pessimists are just wrong. Here's why the disagreement exists. The economists are making fundamentally different assumptions about 4 things: AI capability advancement speed, adoption timeline, new task creation rate, and policy responses. Acemoglu thinks AI capabilities will advance slower than hype suggests. Current systems are good at routine tasks, but struggle with complex, context-dependent work. He's skeptical that near-term AI will handle the hard stuff. Amodei knows what's being built in labs right now. Agentic AI systems that can autonomously complete multi-step tasks. AI that doesn't just assist humans, but replaces humans in entire workflows. He's looking at systems that deploy in 2025 and 2026, not current technology. The adoption speed assumption matters enormously. If companies deploy AI gradually over 20 years, labor markets can adjust. If deployment compresses into 5 years, adjustment mechanisms get overwhelmed. ChatGPT reached 50% of the US population in 10 months. The internet took 17 years. About a quarter of workers were using AI at work by late 2024, less than 2 years after ChatGPT's launch. That adoption velocity suggests disruption could compress into a shorter time frame than historical precedents, which is exactly what Amode is warning about. New task creation is the biggest uncertainty. Historically, technology eliminated jobs but created more than it destroyed. About 85% of employment growth since 1940 came from technology-driven job creation. But Asimoglu's research shows that pattern has weakened substantially since the 1980s. New task creation has slowed precisely as automation accelerated. He calls it so-so automation, displacing workers without correlation productivity gains or new opportunities. If that pattern continues, we get displacement without replacement. If historical trends resume, we get temporary disruption followed by new opportunities. Nobody knows which. Policy responses could change everything. The EU's AI Act requires transparency for AI use in hiring and performance evaluation. Companies must negotiate algorithmic management with trade unions. Workers get informed when subject to AI decisions. The US rolled back AI worker protections within hours of the Trump administration taking office in 2025. No federal framework, fragmented state efforts, companies locating in jurisdictions with minimal worker protections. Different regulatory environments produce different outcomes even with identical technology. Here's the part that should make you uncomfortable. About 42% of CEOs believe AI will displace more jobs than it creates. But a survey found 40% of business leaders who already laid off workers due to AI admit they made wrong decisions. A quarter said they didn't know which roles would benefit most from AI. Over a third cited lack of AI expertise as a barrier. So the people making displacement decisions right now are often guessing, making choices based on herd behavior rather than careful analysis of what AI can actually do versus what they need humans to do. Which means some of the displacement happening in 2025 results from managerial panic and uncertainty, rather than AI actually being capable of replacing those positions. The real answer to how many jobs will AI eliminate is probably, it depends on choices we haven't made yet. Corporate choices about whether to deploy AI for cost reduction or capability enhancement. Worker choices about whether to aggressively upskill. Union choices about whether to negotiate augmentation frameworks. Government choices about support systems and regulations. But those choices need to be made in the next few years. And right now, the people who are supposed to guide those choices, economists, tech leaders, policymakers, can't agree on whether we're facing marginal disruption or economic catastrophe. So, if you're trying to figure out whether your job is safe, whether you should retrain, whether you should panic, the experts can't help you, because they're having the same argument you are, except with more credentials and worse agreement. The difference between 2 million jobs displaced and 30 million jobs displaced is the difference between a manageable transition and social crisis. And we won't know which until it's already happening.